In this lesson, we're going to learn how to use the mouse buttons, clone a window, remove grid lines in fill mode, use Ctrl U to erase the text string, use Ctrl V to display hidden command options, add a cylinder surface, use the draw function, add a sphere surface, use the rest function to redraw the picture, add a spline curve, use the pick panel, use the Z buffer to pick, move a point on a spline curve, add a polygonal line, use F1 to enter a mesh selection into the command, use F2 to clear the mesh selection, use F5 to select the beginning vertex of a mesh, use F6 to select the ending vertex of a mesh, use F8 to type the selected label, and turn labels on and off. First, we're going to discuss the 3 mouse buttons. You can find this page in your training manual.
You have the left button, the middle button, and the right button. Now, the left button is used to select things. It's like using your index finger to point at something. If you wanted to select something, use the left mouse button and click. The middle mouse button is usually for action. We use the middle mouse button for rotation as an example. We'll rotate the mesh in the picture. Basically, the right mouse button is for context-sensitive things. Now, when I'm in the hide graphics, that means I have this button selected, hide, and I use the right mouse button, I get a pop-up called window control, and I can do several things. For instance, I can clone this window. So now I can look at it from 2 different points of view. Another feature when you use the right mouse button has to do with fill graphics. So I'm going to change our graphics to the fill mode and tell it to redraw. Now when I use the right mouse button, I have more options. I still have the ability to clone this window, but I also can remove the grid lines. Or, as you might guess, back on. So those are the 3 basic functions of the mouse buttons. For Ctrl U, suppose that I'm typing in something. So I've typed in something and I go, oops, I don't want that. So I can use the backspace. But if I use Ctrl U, it deletes the entire line. Sometimes you will have a dialog box that you want to fill in, for instance, the surface. And you can see, for example, when we did the cylinder, CY for cylinder. And that's kind of a hidden key that distinguishes one type of surface from another. And that's what is being selected when you click on cylinder, for example. If you want to see all these hidden features in the dialog box, you use Ctrl V for verbose. Now you can see that when you select sphere, for example, internally it's SP, cylinder, CY, and so on and so on. If you use Ctrl V again, the verbose is deactivated. Now, the most important functions that you need to literally memorize are the function keys. That is the 8 keys that sit at the very top row of your keyboard, F1 through F8. And I'm going to demonstrate each one of them. And I'd like you to follow along because we're going to make some geometry and we're going to build a part and then use these functions on it. But don't forget to print out one of these and put it above your keyboard so you can be reminded what these functions will do for you.
We're starting TrueGrid again without selecting a file.
and I click on Parts, click on Block, and I'm going to fill in the numbers here. First of all, the I index list, 1 to 11, and I hit Enter. I do the same for the J list, 1, 11, Enter, and the same for the K list, 1, 11, Enter. Now for coordinates, I'll type in 1 space 2, Enter. 1 space 2, Enter. And just to be a little bit different, this time I'll do 2 space 3, and then click on Execute and Quit. So now we have our mesh in the physical window. We use the middle mouse button, click and drag. You put the mouse in a position, and then you press the middle mouse button down, and then move while holding it down. And when you have it rotated the way you want it rotated, let go of the middle mouse button, and it'll redraw the picture. And that's how you rotate. Now you can also put it in hide graphics. That's probably easier to look at. Click on hide with the left mouse button. Remember, the left mouse button is for selecting things. We're selecting hide graphics with the left mouse button. And then we're going to select to have it redrawn. So I click the mouse button on the draw button so it redraws the picture. Now we're going to create a cylinder. So we go to the menus and click on Surface. And there are a number of commands under Surface. We want the first one, which creates a surface. SD for Surface Definition. I click on it with the left mouse button. I get the dialog box for the surfaces. I'll select surface number 1 and hit Enter. And it's going to be a cylinder. So I click on cylinder, 1, 2, and each time I hit Enter after I type in the number. So I have got 1 up here for the surface number, and then X, Y, and Z. Now this is going to be a point on the center axis of the cylinder. We're essentially establishing a local coordinate system for the cylinder. And this is going to be the center or origin of the cylinder. And then we have a direction vector, which tells us the direction of the axis. And then finally the radius. Click on Execute and Quit. Now it didn't redraw the picture automatically because I clicked on it with my left mouse button. So I need to click on the Draw button to redraw the picture. And now I have my cylinder. Now we're going to create a second surface. Let's go back up and click on the SD command, surface number 2. And this time we're going to create a sphere. So click on sphere. We need to tell it where the center of that sphere is located. Again, it doesn't matter, but we'll start with 3, 2, 1, and a radius of 1. That's surface number 2. Centered at 3, 2, 1, a radius of 1. Execute and quit. But this time, when I click on Execute and Quit, I'm going to use the middle mouse button. That causes TrueGrid to redraw the picture after it executes this command. Now here's my sphere. Now things are getting a little distorted here because we're adding things to the picture that are much bigger than the original view. So in order to put everything in the center of the picture, we click on the Rest button, R-E-S-T. Left mouse button, click on Rest. It then resizes everything. And if we rotate, you can see our mesh on the inside. Using the middle mouse button, click and drag, you can rotate this picture. So here are 2 examples of how to make surfaces in TrueGrid. We're now going to create a spline curve. So we're going to go up into the main menu and click on 3D curves. And the curve that I want to create is a spline. We're going to create a 3D spline curve by selecting points off of our existing geometry. And there are several ways to do that. One of them is to use the picture to get the coordinates. We have to go to the Pick panel. That's this button right here. See, we have 4 buttons in this row, and each one gives us a different set of functions. So if I click on Pick, I then can tell TrueGrid how the left mouse button is going to be used. So I'm going to go to the pick panel using ZBuffer. So I come over here and I put my mouse onto some part of my geometry, in this case, the cylinder, and I click, and it finds the point on the cylinder. Here's the coordinates. Same coordinates are automatically put into this table. Now let's select a second point. I'll come over a little ways and click again. And you'll see that the 2 points I've selected are connected by a straight line, and that second point is listed in this table. Now I'm going to rotate this and choose a third point right here. Now you see I have curvature. That is the nature of cubic splines. Now we could add lots of points if we wanted to. We could go crazy. I don't know what purpose such a curve would play, but it's demonstrating the functionality of this feature. Once you've made your selection of points, you then want to click on the word save. We're going to save this as a 3D curve. Right now, it's not in the database. You have to click on save and then give it a number. We'll start with 1, just like we did with surfaces. So I hit it 1 and then enter. But that's not the only thing you could do. Suppose that this is the problem node, and I want to, or point, and I want to change it instead of deleting it. You come over here and you see insert mode. Turn off the insert mode by clicking on the check mark. Now, when you click, you're not adding a new point, you're just moving one that already exists, so you can change its position. Click on save and give it a number. So I now have saved curve number 1. Now there's another type of curve that we can create, but first of all, we want to quit this window. We're done with that. Highlighting of the curve is no longer showing here. Now we're going to select a set of points that form a polygonal line by clicking on E3. Now it uses the same table for points, but instead of putting a smooth curve through the points, it is giving us straight lines that form the connection between the points. This is what we mean by a polygonal curve. Now, I don't want the one that's a result of the spline curve, so I'm going to tell it to clear the selection. Click on Clear All. And now I'm going to start a new polygonal curve. Again, I'm going to use ZBuffer, and I'll click, 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 click. So there's my polygonal curve. I think you can imagine situations where that curve would be very useful or something like that. So then I come up here, just like with the spline curve, I come up here and click on save and give it a number. I don't want to give 1 because that'll knock out or remove the original spline curve. So I want to click on backspace, enter 2, enter key. So now I have 2 curves, and I can get rid of this menu by clicking on quit.
So now we have 2 surfaces and 2 curves, and this will help us illustrate the use of the function keys.
We're going to demonstrate how we use the function key F1. Now I can select a face in the mesh, for example. I may want to project it to this surface by typing in the command. So I might type in SFI, and then I hit F1. This is the numeric representation of selecting this face. And I did not have to understand it. All I had to do was click on F1. And that is the primary purpose of the F1 function key. No matter what you select, if you can select it, you then can hit F1 key and enter it into a keyword command. Well, that's one use of this. It's not the only one. Suppose that you wanted to create a cylinder. Surface definition number 3 is a cylinder. And you want that cylinder to be centered on this point right here.
After selecting the point, hit F7 and the coordinates will become populated in the text window.
So there is a demonstration of F7. And I would say that F1 and F7 are the two most commonly used function keys.
Down in the environment window, you will notice that it references the F7 function key just above the Z buffer. Currently, all 3 coordinate boxes are checked. There will be times when you want the Y coordinate, for example, and you don't want the X or the Z. You can turn them off by unchecking their coordinate boxes. Then when you hit the F7 key, only the checked coordinates will be printed.
So if I select some object and then I hit F1, it enters the indices. But F7, when I select something, it types the coordinate. So they're related, but those are the two most commonly used function keys. Now, sometimes you want to remove whatever you've selected. Suppose we had selected that face, and you say, I want to clear out all of the selection in the mesh. You hit F2, that clears it. So we'll go to F5, and F5 and F6 work together. There are a variety of ways in which F5 is used. For example, when creating a curve, and we'll go back to 3D curve and click on spline. Now you'll notice that the last point that was put into this window is identified with a square as the focus. So if, for example, I were to turn insert mode off and then start moving it around, it's the point that's focused that gets moved around. Suppose instead of moving this control point, I want to change the coordinates of this control point. Well, you move the mouse close to it and you hit F5 function key, and that control point becomes the focus. Now I can move it around instead of this one here, or I could delete it. So the F5 key will change the focus on a curve, and there are a variety of other uses. Now there's another use for the F5 key. I'm going to use frame here. Now this is a different way of zooming in. If you click on frame, and then with the middle mouse button, you do a click and drag to form a box. That becomes the new window. So another use of the F5 key is to move the mouse close to one of the corners. We call them a vertex. We have 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one hidden. 5, 6, 7, 8. Those are the 8 vertices of this block. They're the corner vertices or nodes. Move it close to a vertex and hit F5, and you'll see that it's highlighted in red. I was able to do that before by clicking over here. But sometimes it's easier to come to the vertex in the picture and hit F5 to make that selection. Now F6 is related to F5 because I can then put the mouse close to a second vertex and hit F6. And now I've selected an edge of the mesh that connects the two vertices that I had selected. Or I could move it over here and hit F6 to select the face. F8 isn't much different. Instead of printing out coordinates, it'll print out a label. So we have to label something in order to show that. I'll go to the Labels panel. Remember, there are 4 panels here. And you click on Labels, you get a different set of functions that your left mouse button will be sensitive to. And I'm going to tell it to label the surface points. So now if I go to the Pick panel, click on Label, I can pick one of these labels. By the way, you'll see the coordinates at those labeled points right here. And when I've selected the label that I want, I then can hit F8 and it'll print out that label into the text window. Or if we had a dialog box, it would print it into the dialog box. So it's related to the F7 key, which is related to the F1. It's printing out something that's been selected. Now I'm going to hit the Cent button to center everything. That's in the environment window, CENT for center. And I'm going to remove all of the labels that you see here. So I go to Labels panel again in the environment window, click on Labels, and this time I'm going to click on Off. It'll turn off all the labels.